Alexandria, 30 BC. A 39-year-old woman is alone in a room of the most luxurious palace in the ancient world. Outside, Roman legions surround the city. Inside, the man she loved has just died in her arms. She knows exactly what awaits her if she allows herself to be captured. What she decides to do in the next few minutes will turn her into a legend for the following 2,000 years. That woman was Cleopatra the 7th Philopator, the last pharaoh of Egypt, and almost everything you think you know about her is wrong. Cleopatra was not Egyptian, and neither was any pharaoh who had ruled Egypt during the 300 years before her. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 331 BC, he left the territory in the hands of one of his most brilliant generals, Ptolemy. Over time, Ptolemy declared himself king, founded his own dynasty, and for centuries his descendants governed the land of the Nile from Alexandria. They were Greeks and Macedonians ruling one of the richest and oldest territories of the known world. For nearly 3 centuries, no member of that dynasty had bothered to learn to speak Egyptian. They married among siblings to preserve bloodline purity, governed a people whose language they ignored, and observed their culture from a calculated distance. For the Ptolemies, Egypt was an inheritance, not an identity. Cleopatra shattered that pattern in a way her predecessors would never have considered necessary. According to the historian Plutarch, who studied her carefully from sources of the era, Cleopatra spoke at least 9 languages: Greek, Egyptian, Ethiopian, Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, Latin, Parthian, and Median. She was the first pharaoh of her dynasty to bother learning the language of her own people. For Egyptians, that gesture carried enormous weight. She was not simply another foreign queen arriving with guards and decrees. She was someone who could look them in the eyes and speak to them directly, who dressed in the sacred robes of Isis, who participated in temple rituals with a conviction her predecessors had never shown. She built a connection with her people that no Ptolemy had ever achieved. And for 20 years, that connection was her greatest source of power. But to understand Cleopatra, you have to understand the broken world she inherited. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was a weak man who had come to power by buying support in Rome. He paid colossal sums to Roman senators and generals to keep him on the throne against his own internal rivals. When he died, he left Egypt impoverished, with a massive debt to Rome and a complicated succession. Cleopatra, his eldest daughter, was required to govern jointly with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was barely 10 years old. Cleopatra was 18 years old when she became pharaoh, a country in debt and a child brother whose advisors were already scheming to strip her of power. They didn't take long. In 49 BC, the advisors of Ptolemy XIII achieved what they sought. Cleopatra was expelled from Alexandria by her own brother's forces and had to flee to the desert, to the Syrian border, where she assembled a small army with whatever money and support she had left. What do you do when you're 22 years old? Your throne has been taken from you. Your city and your palace are gone, and the enemy is your own 10-year-old brother, controlled by adults who want you dead. Most people would look to negotiate, to yield, to survive in the background. Cleopatra bet everything on a single card, the riskiest one possible. Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria in 48 BC, pursuing his enemy Pompey from Rome's civil war. When he disembarked, he was handed Pompey's head as a diplomatic gift. Caesar, according to the sources, wept. It was not what he expected. And in that moment, Cleopatra understood she had a window of opportunity. She requested an audience. The problem was that her brother's men controlled the city. If she tried to enter, she would be captured before reaching the palace. So she made a decision that has been etched into history with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. She had herself rolled inside a carpet and smuggled clandestinely into the royal palace to be presented before the most powerful man in the known world. Pause on that image. The Queen of Egypt, heir to 4,000 years of pharaonic history, climbing inside a carpet to outwit the guards of her 10-year-old brother. That tells you everything about the desperation of the moment. But it also tells you everything about her intelligence. She knew exactly what she needed, knew there was only one way to get it, and executed it without hesitation. Caesar was completely captivated, not so much, according to the chroniclers, by her physical appearance, but by something harder to describe and even harder to resist. Historian Stacy Schiff, who dedicated a monumental biography to her based on primary sources, notes that Cleopatra had an extraordinary capacity for conversational adaptation. She spoke Latin with Caesar. She knew history, philosophy, politics, military strategy. She could discuss any topic on any interlocutor's terrain. The alliance was immediate. Caesar provided military support to Cleopatra. The forces of Ptolemy XIII were defeated, and the young brother drowned in the Nile while trying to flee. Cleopatra recovered her throne, and then did something that astonished the Roman world. She traveled to Rome with Caesar and their son Caesarion, and settled in the city as an official guest. Think about it. A foreign queen with the son of the most powerful man in Rome, walking through the streets of the capital of the world. The Romans hated her. Cicero detested her publicly and wrote about it in his letters with a bitterness that is revealing. They saw her as an Eastern threat, a corrupting influence on their general. But while Caesar lived, Cleopatra was protected. On March 15th, 44 BC, everything ended in an instant. Julius Caesar fell in the Roman Senate, 23 wounds. Cleopatra, who was in the city at that moment, understood within hours that her position was completely untenable. Without Caesar, she was a foreign queen with an illegitimate son in a city that despised her. She returned to Egypt and waited, because Cleopatra always knew when to wait. What followed was one of the most chaotic periods in Roman history. The Mediterranean world split in two. Those who had eliminated Caesar, led by Brutus and Cassius, and those who wanted to avenge him, led by Mark Antony and the young Octavian, Caesar's adopted nephew. The civil war that followed devastated the Mediterranean for years, and that is where Cleopatra's second great gamble appeared. In 41 BC, Mark Antony, who controlled the eastern half of the Roman world, summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus to question her about alleged support for his enemies during the civil war. It was a potentially dangerous meeting. Cleopatra could have sent an ambassador, could have sent gifts and apologies. Instead, she organized an entrance that Plutarch describes in such detail, it seems impossible he wasn't inventing it, though there are reasons to believe it was real. Cleopatra arrived sailing down the river Cydnus on a ship with sails dyed purple, oars plated with silver, and herself reclining under a golden canopy, dressed as Aphrodite, surrounded by boys dressed as Cupid, and women costumed as the Graces and Nereids. The scent of incense reached the shore long before the ship did. The entire city came out to watch. Mark Antony was left sitting alone on his throne, while the crowd that should have received him abandoned him to watch the queen go by. This was not empty theater. It was a perfectly calculated political message. I am your equal, not your subordinate. And that message landed with surgical precision. The relationship between Cleopatra and Mark Antony lasted over a decade and produced 3 children. But beyond the personal, it was a geopolitical alliance with impeccable logic. Cleopatra needed Rome's military protection to maintain her independence. Antony needed Egypt's wealth to finance his enormously costly military campaigns in the east. They needed each other in a way neither could pretend otherwise, and for several years it worked extraordinarily well. The problem for Mark Antony was not in the east, it was in Rome, where Octavian observed him with calculated coldness and a patience that was frightening. Octavian was exactly the opposite of Antony in every way. Where Antony was charismatic, impulsive, and visceral, Octavian was methodical, cold, and absolutely implacable. And Octavian understood something that very few in the ancient world grasped with such clarity. Public narrative was a weapon as lethal as a legion. He launched a systematic propaganda campaign. He portrayed Mark Antony as a degenerate Roman who had abandoned his values, surrendered to Eastern luxury, and obeyed the whims of a foreign queen. He constructed Cleopatra as an existential threat to Rome, the witch of the East who had bewitched his best general and planned to destroy the Republic from within. It worked with terrifying efficiency. The Senate declared war, and here is a detail worth pausing on. They did not declare war against Mark Antony, who was a Roman citizen. They declared war directly against Cleopatra. It was the first time in Roman history that war had been formally declared against a foreign woman. That fact alone tells you the level of threat she represented in the Roman imagination of the era. The final battle came on September 2nd, 31 BC, off Cape Actium on the western coast of Greece. The combined fleets of Antony and Cleopatra faced Octavian's fleet in what would be the most decisive naval battle of the ancient era. What exactly happened inside that battle has generated debate among historians for centuries. Ancient sources, most of them favorable to Octavian, claim that Cleopatra's ships broke formation and fled toward Egypt, and that Antony followed, leaving his fleet without leadership. More recent interpretations suggest the retreat was a tactical decision in the face of a battle already lost, an attempt to save the ships to protect Egypt and have something to negotiate with afterward. We will never know the truth with certainty. What we do know is that after Actium, time ran out for both of them. Octavian advanced on Alexandria. Antony, desperate and misinformed, received the false rumor that Cleopatra had died. He could not go on. He took his own life, though according to the chronicles he did so clumsily and took hours to die. He was brought before Cleopatra, who was still alive, and breathed his last in her arms. And then she was completely alone. She tried to negotiate with Octavian. There are indications she tried to use the same strategy that had worked with Caesar and Antony. But Octavian was different, radically different. He was immune to it, or simply had too clear a vision of what he wanted. To lead her to Rome in chains as the ultimate trophy of his victory. To display her in the triumphal parade before all the Roman people. To prove to the world that he had subdued the last independent kingdom of the Mediterranean and the woman who governed it. Cleopatra understood this with a lucidity that must have been terrifying. On August 12th, 30 BC, Cleopatra VII. Philopator was 39 years old, according to the version that has survived most powerfully across the centuries. She introduced a cobra into her chamber, a sacred animal in Egypt and symbol of divine royalty since the most ancient times, and let it bite her. What the Roman guards found was her two handmaidens, also lifeless, and Cleopatra herself, dressed in her royal robes, crown in place, reclining as if asleep. She died as a pharaoh, not as a prisoner. Plutarch wrote it with a concision that still impresses. No one knew with certainty how she died, only that she chose to die on her own terms. With her death, 4,000 years of pharaonic history came to an end. Octavian, who from that moment would begin to call himself Augustus, transformed Egypt into a Roman province. He had Caesarion eliminated. The other three children, those she had with Antony, were taken to Rome and raised, with brutal irony, by Octavia, Antony's legitimate wife. The image the world has inherited of Cleopatra, the calculating seductress who used love and her body to climb to power, is almost entirely a construction of her enemies. The Roman writers who spoke of her hated her, or answered to those who did. For them, she was the threat that nearly destroyed the Republic. Naturally, they painted her in the darkest colors they could find. The historical reality is more complex, more interesting, and far more uncomfortable for that narrative. Cleopatra governed Egypt for 20 years under conditions that would have crushed any less capable ruler. She maintained her country's independence against the greatest power in the world for 2 decades. She reformed the monetary system, stabilized the economy, spoke 9 languages, and participated actively in the most important military and diplomatic decisions of her time. Several modern historians argue without hesitation that she was probably the most capable ruler of her era. Regardless of gender, the problem, the only and definitive problem, is that she lost. And history is always written by those who survive. If Actium had gone differently, if Mark Antony had prevailed, we would today speak of Cleopatra as the great architect of a unified Mediterranean world, and Octavian would be the tyrant who tried to destroy it. That is how historical memory works. It does not always reward those who are right, only those who are left standing at the end. Cleopatra chose not to remain standing under conditions of humiliation. And in that final gesture, that last decision made in solitude inside a palace surrounded by enemy legions, there is something that no conqueror, not Octavian, not time, not 2,000 years of narrative distortion, has ever been able to take from her entirely. The last decision was hers.